So the topic today is very near and dear to my heart. It's a very simple concept, but this single simple concept is what I feel is lacking in most of the world today. In my previous video, I briefly referenced Qatar, this issue that has recently come to light due to the World Cup. But a lot of people may not know that these issues have been ongoing for quite some time. I want to specifically address one of the comments which I received on this video. But before I show you guys the comment and I read the comment, I want to say that I do believe that most people have a good intent. So this person who wrote this comment, I understand where they're coming from. I understand that they had a good intent, and I understand the meaning behind it. But there is an issue with it which I would like to address. And so the comment reads, "The people in Qatar are not calling for equal human rights. The protesters are European and American guests for only 28 days who think they are on a white man's civilizing mission and want to lecture other people. Your reference to Qatar indirectly validates the arrogant Euro-American discourse that you personally critique sometimes." So first of all, I'd like to thank you to the person who commented, and thank you for calling me out, because I think this creates an opportunity to open up a dialogue, which is happening right now. So now here's my issue with this statement. The protesters are European and American guests for only 28 days who think they are on a white man's civilizing mission and want to lecture other people. Your reference to Qatar indirectly validates the arrogant Euro-American discourse that you personally critique sometimes. There's so much I want to say to this statement because it is a very loaded statement. But before we get into my response to this comment, I'd like to tell you guys a little story about me, which will kind of help you understand where my response leads into and where it stems from. I was born in India to Indian parents. I grew up in India until I was 9 years old. So until then, I had no exposure to America. I had no exposure to Europe. I had no exposure to the white man in any part of my life who was promoting the white man's civilizing mission ideas. My education came directly from my two Indian parents. I didn't go to an international school or traveled internationally. So my point is that my only exposure to society was my parents, neighbors, the extended family, and my public schooling in India. My moral compass was defined by these things only. And to a certain extent, I also believe that we form our own moral compasses. Going back to my years in India, growing up in India back then was, and still is to a certain extent, to have help, which is pretty common. You hire help for low income to do house cleaning work, cooking, dishes, laundry, and so forth. There's also a whole other issue that I have towards this, but that's not the point of this video. My mom had one helper who would come and do the laundry, and she would help her clean the house. One day, I was probably around 8 years old. I saw my mom giving this helper that she had water to drink. My mom was pouring water into her hands while she was drinking from her hands. As an 8-year-old, I was so bothered by this. I remember walking up to both of them and I looked at my mom. I asked my mom, "Why aren't you giving her an actual glass to drink from?" Both my mom and the helper looked at me confused. And I still remember this like it was yesterday. There's like certain things that you just latch onto and you remember every detail. And that's one of those things. So my mom looked at me and she said, "Well, I will offer her a glass, but she chooses not to drink out of a glass." And then I looked at the helper and I asked her, "Why would you not drink out of a glass?" She started smiling and then she started laughing and then she was looking at my mom and they were both smiling. And then she said in Hindi, "Ye to bacha hai, isko kya malum," which translates to, "He's just a little kid. He doesn't know any better." And as an 8-year-old, I was really annoyed that why aren't they really truly telling me what's going on? So I asked my mom again, but this time I demanded, to know why wasn't she drinking from a glass. So my mom said again, I will give her the glass, but she will not drink from it. So the helper then looked at my mom and she said again in Hindi, Isko kya pata achut kya hai? Which translates to, he doesn't know what an untouchable is. And as they were going back and forth in this conversation, I was so annoyed as a child. I jumped into the conversation, I cut them off, and I demanded that she drink from the glass. And I remember saying to the helper, मुझे पता है अछूत क्या होता है, लेकिन आपको ग्लास से ही पीना पड़ेगा. Which translates to, I know what an untouchable is, but you have to drink from a glass. The helper kept laughing and smiling, insinuating that I was just a child, that I didn't know any better. And I was so angry at that point, and we still laugh about it, my mom and I, that I told my mom that when I grow up, I'm going to marry her. And that was my way of saying, as a kid, that fuck this deplorable culture ideal. I may be a child, but this inequality is fucked up. As a kid, I fucking knew better. As a child, I saw everyone as an equal. My statement to marry her was fighting for this inequality, which I had seen as a kid. I was going against the grain of society which I was brought up in, recognizing that she's a human, just like me, just like my mom standing there, just like any other human which walks on this planet. So now going back to the statement in the comment that the protesters are European and American guests for only 28 days who think they are on a white man's civilizing mission and want to lecture other people. I'm sorry, but basic human rights is not a white man thing. It's not an American thing. It's not a European thing. For anyone who uses culture, religion, region, or color of your skin to deny basic human rights or to justify unjust, you need to take a deep look into your own self. What kind of human are you? What gives you the right to deny basic human rights to women, to LGBTQ+, or to anyone for that matter? What makes you think you are better than any other person in this world? Human rights is not an asset that you own. It's a right that we are all born with. And sadly, it is a right which is taken away by people projecting their own agendas disguised in religion and culture. So to anyone out there who feels that you have a right to dictate someone else's human rights, you can go